I've been wanting to tell this story about how when I opened my e-bike shop in New York City in 2015, I got a fine from the city for $25,000. I've been kind of nervous about talking about it for a while because it's been a little bit of a challenging environment legally in New York City for a long time around e-bikes. Can I talk about it? Am I going to get myself in trouble? Am I going to become a target? That like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones sort of scenario. But I feel like the environment has changed a little bit in New York. I mean, you guys are all reading articles. I read a lot of articles about New York City putting in more bike lanes, and now they got electric city bike, and now we have like commercial companies like Whole Foods using electric bikes to get goods around. And things have changed quite a bit since I started the store in 2015. I started the business 10 years ago in 2011. And at that time, it was pretty crazy. Actually, electric bikes, for all intents and purposes, were considered to be illegal, but not explicitly illegal, not all types at least. Now, this actually came from a law that was introduced in 2004, and it basically outlawed throttle-activated electric bikes. It wasn't really necessarily intentionally making throttle-activated bikes illegal, but it just happened to. This law was introduced because a young 16-year-old kid crashed and died on a mini gas-powered motorcycle in Queens. City Council enacted a bill to make these type of unregistered scooters to be illegal. Like that's what they were considered. Like anything that was not a bicycle or a scooter was kind of like considered a illegal motor vehicle in some ways. And electric bikes kind of happened just by default to fall into that category. I don't think it was intentional. In 2004, there weren't too many electric bikes on the market. At that time in New York City, actually like gas-powered go-peds were a thing, which is kind of strange. You don't really see those around too much anymore, but you see plenty of electric scooters. The same sort of thing. This was like the stand-up scooter, but it was gas-powered. Actually, funny enough, there was a movie with Adam Sandler in it, and he rode around the city in one of these things. And it was kind of reminiscent of that time. You also had these other, mopeds or whatever else, and it wasn't always so easy to register them or make them like legal. Now, even though the law was the way it was at that time, and it was a very challenging time at that, and it kind of existed for nearly 5 years, and it still kind of exists on some level today. People had bikes being confiscated, they were getting $1,000 fines, all this sort of stuff. I still, at that moment, knowing all this, decided to open a bike shop in New York City selling exclusively electric bikes. I kind of bring this up a lot. People probably think I'm crazy. People explicitly told me that I'm probably crazy for doing that. But I knew that if we wanted to get electric bikes out there into the public and make this a bigger thing and really be part of the conversation, we needed to do this. You couldn't really get to the place that we are today without actually having electric bikes on the streets. People need to have an opportunity to have experience with them. And they need to be presented in a bit of a different way, because historically they were presented as just something that delivery riders used. This was explicitly in New York City. This was the majority of people that were using electric bikes at that time were delivery riders. And that's still more or less the case today. But more and more, just the general public are using electric bikes to get around. There's families that are using them. There's other larger commercial businesses using them. And that shift is happening. But it needed to happen from someplace. And I knew that. But I was like, well, how can we make this happen? At this time, I was in business for about 4 years and selling electric bikes, mostly actually outside of New York, because the laws in New York were pretty prohibitive to actually selling my products. But I knew that eventually New York is going to be one of the biggest markets in the world. So I need to continue down this path, but how do I do it? For me, I never really take things at face value. I saw what the law was. Let me try to understand this a bit more. And what I realized is that actually, although it's saying throttle-activated bikes are illegal, it's not actually saying pedal-assist bikes are illegal. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but the way that the law generally works, if something's not illegal, it's technically legal. This law kind of left a bit of a loophole for pedal-assist bikes. So I said, okay, I'm going to open this store, and we're going to sell exclusively pedal-assist bikes. And that's what we did. Now, I knew I was taking a risk, and I knew it was going to be challenging, but I figured the upside is pretty big, and I figured that this is something that really needs to happen. And for me, this was at a time in my life that I felt like I really needed to do something meaningful. I felt like I needed to have a greater purpose than I did. I saw this as an opportunity. Wow, I can make an impact on this city that's like so impacted by traffic and air quality issues with so many cars in the city. And I knew like what bikes could do. So I figured I would take that risk. And 6 months after I opened the store, I got a visit from an inspector from the Department of Consumer Affairs in New York City. And this inspector came into the store, didn't really look around the store too much, and he informed me that he's there to write me a violation. Well, I would imagine that you're supposed to do some inspection and figure out that I'm not meeting some certain code, and then you're going to write a violation, not just I'm going to arrive and write a violation. He said, no, I'm here to write a violation. I said, okay, what are you writing me a violation for? He said, well, I'm citing this New York City law that says electric bikes are illegal. I said, well, actually, that's not what the law says. Not trying to be confrontational. I respect law enforcement, but hey, this is not what the law says. It says any 2- or 3-wheeled vehicle that can be operated without human assistance is considered to be a scooter, and if it can't be registered, it's illegal to operate, and it's also illegal to sell. But I knew that pedal assist bikes, they require human assistance to be operated. And I was willing to, push that boundary there. He wasn't really willing to listen, and basically he wrote me this fine. But it seemed like he didn't really know what the law was. But I knew what the law was. I was very familiar with it. I mean, I bet my life and my business on it, ultimately. So based on this definition, from my perspective, my pedal assist bicycles were not really considered motorized scooters. Someone can argue that they were, but I could also argue that they're not. I know in these type of arguments who usually wins, but I said I'm willing to take that fight. But this one felt a little bit unfair. I got this fine, and so I said, okay. I said, I'm not willing to accept this fine. These are not just charges. He said, well, I could either call the police and have you forcefully to sign this document. I said, okay, fine. I'll sign it, and I'll have to deal with it under other means. You're obviously not being very reasonable. I understand. This guy's doing his job. Somebody came down and said, hey, I want you to go around to all these electric bike shops and give them fines, and I want them to stop selling these illegal scooters. I'm sure nobody really knew that we were kind of operating in this like gray area loophole. But whatever. So I took the fine, and the next day, I'm on the phone. I mean, this was in November of 2015. I opened the store on June 1st, 2015. It was really unfortunate. It didn't really take too long for this thing to catch up to me here, but I knew that this was coming, but I said, okay, you know what? This is going to be a fun story to tell one day, and I'm telling it right here, so that's pretty cool. I called the Department of Consumer Affairs. I called all these different offices. I called the borough president. I called my council member. I realized I can call this special office. It's called the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs. So some of you might not know, but I'm a disabled Iraq war veteran, and I called and said, hey, my name is Chris Nolte, and I opened an electric bike shop in Brooklyn. I'm a disabled Iraq war veteran, and 6 months after I opened this store, which I guess actually is 5 months, I got $25,000 fine. This just doesn't seem too fair to me. And they said, well, we don't issue fines for $25,000. They said, well, I got one right here. And they said, well, okay, let me, look into it. And unfortunately, I don't remember the person's name, but if you're watching this, thank you very much, because I really appreciate you helping me with this. But basically, I got a call 2 days later, and they said, as we say in New York, it's taken care of. And so don't worry about that. There was a clerical error with that fine, and maybe I shouldn't be talking about this because it's going to, spark something up. I'm sorry if that's upsetting somebody. I feel like this is a story that needs to be told. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. I said, okay, well, we're in a decent place, but I still have this threat because the law is not super clear. And we were really talking to different media and really trying to educate people about the law. And we had meetings with the mayor's office. We had meetings with the governor's office. And we spent a lot of time in Albany trying to address this, which it's really a city thing, but the city wasn't really coming around. So we figured maybe we'll address it on the state level. But I kept on doing my thing. And a year later, somebody from Department of Consumer Affairs came back and visited. And this time, they gave us another fine for $7,000. And I said, I could probably go through the same means that I did before, but actually that's not really going to help me too much. Instead, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to court because I know that I have a case. Sure enough, I waited till my court case. I had a lawyer that helped me with it, but I knew what the defense was, and I was very clear on it. I had all the documentation. I went to court, and the judge heard both sides. And it was clear in the same instance, the inspector really didn't know what they were talking about. And they basically said, yeah, you know what? Like, this is not right. Like, the law is not written in such a way that these pedal assist bikes are considered motorized scooters. Actually, at that time, we actually helped to set a legal precedent that pedal assist bikes were legal in New York City, even though the laws and a lot of the media would have you believe that all electric bikes were illegal. And this was a good starting place. I felt like I had some ground to stand on. I felt a little bit more secure, that my serious investment of time and money and all these people whose jobs depended on me, that I could do this thing and I can stick with this and I can continue to talk and promote this and feel a little bit more comfortable speaking with customers that came into my store, which, by the way, was such an uncomfortable experience. Because basically people came into my store and I said, hey, listen, by the way, I just want to start this conversation and say, these bikes are technically not illegal, but technically not explicitly legal. So it's kind of this weird thing. This is the law. This is the situation. The reality is, for the most part, nobody's having an issue with pedal assist bikes. A lot of people are having issues with throttle bikes. I feel obligated to let you know this. I mean, I think some retailers were just like, oh yeah, it's all good, it's green technology, but I'm not comfortable doing that stuff. For me, my reputation is very important to me and my word is very important to me, so I don't want to misrepresent myself. Whatever, we had this new precedent and, I could say the story will end there. I mean, there's a lot more to discuss about it. Kind of end this in just saying that happened. We still continue to fight to get a specific law in the books, because although you have legal precedent, you don't necessarily want to be dependent on that. You want to have a law that's clear. And the reality is we fought for it, we went to Albany, all this sort of thing. And actually what happened was City Bike, they wanted electric bikes. More or less overnight, the law changed. It's kind of how it works sometimes. Now, I'm really grateful for it. I'm not complaining. I'm happy that we're making progress. It's really cool to see all the growth of electric bikes in New York City. And I'm just really grateful that I had some part in that and that we can continue to participate in that, because it's really exciting and it's really kind of an honor to me. I'm not looking to try and take credit here or anything like that. I just wanted to tell that kind of little interesting anecdotal story about the history of e-bikes in New York City and some of my experience around that. It hasn't always just been a fun ride, but it's definitely, I think, there's a fun ride ahead, and I'm excited to be part of that. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I know that this is a little bit different than some of the stuff that we normally do. What do you think? Do you want to see more of these stories in the future? Would you like to know more of these history things about me, about Propel, about the e-bike industry? I think that they're interesting, but maybe not everybody does, so let me know. All right, see you soon.